Hi, welcome to my channel. My name's Lara, adoptee, adoption wellbeing researcher, coach and psychotherapist. And today I'm talking to you all about the journey to wellbeing. One of the findings in my research was that the adoptee group is overrepresented in therapy. People that I talk to regularly talk about the pain and the suffering and the loss and the psychological adjustment and how that all feels, formation of identity, and just trying to kind of get a handle on ourselves and find out how we fit into this world. And there are all sorts of things that can feel quite difficult that come along with that. Let's call them themes of worthiness and of lovability and all those sorts of things. And so the journey to well-being for an adoptee can be somewhat challenged. And of course this is the reason for the research that I carried out, because my own journey to well-being was also challenged, and I wanted to see whether mine was a unique experience. We know that people have different experiences of adoption and they bond differently with different families, and what the findings suggest is a lot of that is based on how the fact of adoption is handled within the adopted family. Hence the need for open communication, the need for mentalization, the need to have these conversations with the siblings as well, to involve everybody, to provide therapy as standard for adoptees as they enter adolescence and early adulthood. So the findings are the 6 points in the video that I will link below. But more generally, contextual findings in the research point to adoptees being overrepresented in therapy. And not all adoptees will attribute their adopted status to the cause of their mental ill health. And I think there's this idea that if you've been brought up in a stable, consistent family or household, and that your physical needs have been met, that you haven't been emotionally neglected or abused, that there's no need to attribute mental ill health or anxiety or low mood to the adoptee, to the adopted status. And so therefore many adoptees go into therapy not realizing that it is their adopted status that has contributed to that. And so therefore they may have internalized the grief, they may have internalized the loss, they don't want to attribute that to the feelings of having been given up for adoption. That's also a very painful thought process to embark on for all sorts of other reasons. And also because of a sense of loyalty towards the adoptive family and sometimes guilt towards the adoptive family. It's very hard for many people to attribute how they feel and the behaviours that they act upon in their lives to the fact of adoption. But the research shows that the adoptee group struggles more to achieve well-being. So we now know this to be true, and it therefore bears out the fact that adoptees are overrepresented in therapy. And so that's really how my own journey to well-being began. I was a very withdrawn child, and I talk about that in one of my earlier videos. In fact, to the point that I think I would be considered compliant. And we know that that's one of the two main ways in which adoptees behave and cope with their feelings, maybe unconscious feelings at this stage, is to deal with those in an internal way. And how that manifests is that the adoptee is, quiet, compliant, well-behaved, if you like, and maybe quietly traumatized and in shock actually, and dealing with a whole host of emotions that pre-verbally and then later they don't necessarily have the vocabulary for. A lot of the feelings are felt rather than being able to be clearly articulated. So for me, I was an internalizer, and that translated to my being a very withdrawn, quiet and compliant child. In fact, I was told that I could be put in my chair in a corner of the room for hours and hours on end, and you just wouldn't know I was there. You might think that's alarming behaviour when you know the research, but to a parent who didn't have any other children, didn't quite know what to expect, wasn't prepared, certainly wasn't prepared through the genetic process of carrying a child through pregnancy for parenthood, that must have seemed like the lottery to have such a compliant child. Nevertheless, I was a quiet, compliant child. But when I hit adolescence, I very soon began to feel misunderstood. I didn't have any real outlet for my feelings of unworthiness. I didn't know how to deal with my feelings of unworthiness. I didn't know how to express the pain around the rejection that I had felt, even though I could cognitively and logically make sense of why I had been given up for adoption. And that very much to do with not only the age of my biological mother at the time of birth, but also some of the circumstances surrounding that. So I could logically understand that, I could process that in a cognitive way, but it still hurt. It still hurt me and many millions of other people who kind of understand it, but it still hurts. It's one of those wounds that you just carry that for life. So it kind of was something that I couldn't very easily come to terms with. I found that I became very reflective and quite philosophical, and I started questioning the point of life and what are we here for and what's the point of it all. And I think some of my questions kind of went a little bit too deep probably for some of the people around me who didn't know how to respond. But the net result was that I ended up dealing with my behaviours through outward kind of negative patterns that were set up quite early. And these would be sort of outside of the home. Emotionally, I wasn't present in the house because I found it very difficult to express myself given my context and my unique experience. So all of this very quickly led to quite low mood, and in my early 20s I hit an all-time low, and that's where my first counselling session started. So I went into counselling that age and I explored a lot of my feelings, and it helped. It absolutely helped bring me back from a very dark place at that time. But since then, I've been involved in self-development, counselling, psychotherapy, coaching, all of those kinds of topics, and more recently existential psychotherapy is where I've specialised. But my journey to wellbeing has been a very gradual process. And what I find these days is that all of those things, all of those experiences have got me to the point that I'm at today, which is of truly knowing myself. And I think that takes a while. That is a process. That's something that we have to learn. We have to learn who we are, and we have to learn why we feel particular ways, and we have to learn why we have set up particular patterns of being, and then to kind of get to know ourselves and be compassionate with ourselves for some of those things, and to kind of find ways to live every day that are fulfilling to ourselves. And so that will bring me on to my next video, which is very much about the concept of time. But for this one, I just wanted to say that all of those things have been very important to me. And these days, I also very much value my own well-being routine. And it's one of those things that millions of people around the world have benefited from. It's something that people have been benefiting from for thousands of years, actually. The idea of having a well-being routine is absolutely vital. And what that does is that the well-being routine is the thing that helps you stay in the present moment. And as I say, in my next video, I'm going to talk about the concept of time and how I view that. But being in the present moment is, well, Eckhart Tolle will say that we should be doing that all of the time. And I believe that's partly true. I don't think that's necessarily true for all of the time. My own belief is that that's a vital part of living with well-being is the ability to stay present. And so the well-being routine is what enables me to do that. And for me, my own well-being is how I think about the 4 cornerstones of my own well-being. And those 4 cornerstones are all of the aspects that make up how I am in the world and how I experience myself in the world. And these are one aspect of coming to a place of feeling good in life, but it's a very, very important aspect. And for me, I believe that well-being is something that we need to work on. It doesn't just happen. Some people say they liken it to getting your garden nice and tended, but you have to keep on digging up the weeds. And so a well-being routine means that even when you're feeling good and that life feels better, you just have to keep on doing that every day in order to get yourself more resilient for when the tough days come. And the way that I think about myself and the way that I talk to my clients about themselves is experiencing ourselves in 4 dimensions very often. The first is our body and how we treat it. The second is our mind and how we treat it, but also challenge it. The third is our heart and everything to do with love and compassion. And the fourth, and this is the biggest dimension for me, is our way of being. And so that's where, when we've learned who we are and we can figure out what feels right and what doesn't feel right, is that we can adapt our way of being in the world to that which feels most appropriate for us. And through that, we can look to achieve greater levels of well-being. So it's just another tool in the toolkit, if you like. The 6 points that I mentioned in my other video are absolutely crucial, that the need to have a healthy self-concept comes from open communication and of validation from the people around us. But then later we have to work on ourselves, and to keep our well-being levels raised, we have to keep on doing those things. In forthcoming videos, I am going to talk a little bit more about those 4 concepts. And I hope you found this interesting. I hope you find it helpful. But it's kind of readily accepted now that well-being doesn't just happen on its own. We have to work at it. It's something that we have to put effort into and nurture and make time for. So we have to make time for ourselves. So thanks for watching. I hope this video has resonated with you. If you like the video and any of my videos, please like, subscribe, tell your friends and colleagues, and hit the bell if you'd like to receive updates. Thank you.